Fun fact, before he took up this task, Bruichladdich used to only make unpeated whiskey.
But if you give it time, I think you will fall in love with this whiskey.
Very bold and very intense on the palate.
It will make you unstable or your taste buds go haywire. Alright, whiskey fans, what's the most extreme whiskey that you have ever tried? Because we are going all in with the most heavily peated whiskey known to mankind, the Octomore. Octomore 8.2 to be precise. While its sibling 8.3 blazed all records by becoming the most heavily peated whiskey ever, clocking a ppm of 309. And to put things into perspective, some of the most popular peated whiskies from Islay such as Ardbeg, Laphroaig and Lagavulin, they are all peated to ppm levels of about 30 to 55. Octomore 8.2 that we are going to taste today has a ppm of 167, and that by no means is a lightweight. Before we get started with the tasting of this heavyweight, why don't you fill us in with the history and origins of the Octomore series?
Octomore comes from the Bruichladdich Distillery, which when Mark Rainier bought in 2000, he quickly requested Master Distiller Jim McEwan to join him. And Jim McEwan, the first agenda that he had was to make Octomore the peatiest whiskey ever. And fun fact, before he took up this task, Bruichladdich used to only make unpeated whiskies.
So he wanted to create a very distinct...
Yes, a distinct identity, a distinct brand line which only spoke about peated whiskies.
Right.
And so to make peated whiskies, you need peated malted barley.
Of course.
He went to Port Ellen Maltings to get that malted barley, but Port Ellen Maltings was already running full capacity, so they refused him. He came across Baird's Malting, and
Baird Malting
is near Inverness in Scotland, Scottish mainland. What he found out is the way their process of peating the barley would lead to very, very high ppms.
Okay.
In fact, malted barley would become so peated that they had to cut it by adding unpeated barley just to balance out the flavors.
Wow, okay.
Right? And that's when the light bulb went on. Okay. He tried to understand what's the maximum level of ppm that can be achieved.
Okay.
And that essentially was the birth of the Octomore series.
Purely accidental in a way.
Yes. I'm sure he was looking at it and then he came across the right set of people who could help him.
But thank God Port Ellen Maltings were full completely. They had no capacity.
Yeah.
So otherwise, I mean, it's up in the air whether we would have had an Octomore or not.
Yeah. But I'm sure he would have found a way. That's how Bruichladdich started Octomore series. They always have 4 releases that happen together. So it's 0.1, 0.2, 0.3 and 0.4.
Got it. Also, interestingly, the distillery calls the Octomore series an impossible equation that it shouldn't work, but they've made it work with their every release. I think we've tried quite a few Octomores and we have never been disappointed.
So I think we've tried the 8, we've tried the 10.
11.
I think those are the 3 that
we've tried. And there are a few lines that we are yet to open.
Yeah.
Because also the thing with now, with all the Octomore series, with all the rave reviews that they've been getting across, they sell out very, very fast.
Yeah. But Vinayak, what is the distinct, like, I know they have 0.1 is the same style of making, 0.2 is same, 0.3 is...
Okay,
so
got it.
Can you just elaborate a little bit?
2008 is when they released the first series of Octomore.
Right.
And every series has a decimal number. So let's say, because for example, we have 8.2 here. So they had a 8.1, 8.2, 8.3, 8.4. The next year they would have had a 9.1, 9.2.
Okay.
So all the 0.1 releases are matured in American oak ex-bourbon barrels and are aged for about 5 years.
Okay.
Next is the 0.2, which is where the distiller goes like Willy Wonka sort of a thing.
Okay.
It's like his playground where they experiment with various styles of casks. That's where most of the 0.2 series that you will see, they experiment with different wine cask finishes, different sherry cask finishes. So that's what your 0.2 is all about.
Right.
0.3 release is always made from barley that is sourced from Octomore farms, because that's the farm that they have, and it's the true expression of Islay terroir or provenance.
Right.
And the last one is the 0.4, which is always matured in virgin oak casks.
Right.
However, what they do here is they experiment while they use the virgin oak cask.
Right.
They experiment with the size of the cask and the levels of char or toasting.
Interesting. So it's a very experimental series.
Yeah. I mean, all four of them are
Yeah,
very
all
different.
four. Yeah, that's what
But
I
the
meant.
biggest experiment that they do is in the 0.2 series.
Interesting. And that's what we're tasting today, right?
Yes, but before we dive into the tasting, here's a quick trivia question. Please answer in the comments. What's the name of the other peated whiskey that is made at the Bruichladdich Distillery? So Octomore 8.2, bottle at an ABV of 58.47% and clocks a ppm of 167. Yes, you heard it right. 167, which is almost thrice the ppm that you get in a Laphroaig or an Ardbeg.
And what are the casks this is matured in?
So it's been matured for 6 years in French Mourvedre cask, Austrian sweet wine and French Sauternes casks, and then finished in Amarone casks for an additional 2 years.
So it's about 8 years.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
So what do you think on the color on this one, Swati?
It's copper.
There's this like amberish.
Amberish hues.
It's definitely copper and amberish.
Yeah.
And also something important that I forgot to add that we all missed. That all Octomores are bottled at cask strength.
Okay. Okay. Wow.
Smoke. Oh, this reminds me of that Hindi song. Dhua dhua ho raha hai sama.
Dhua dhua ho raha hai sama.
It's like so much smoke. Sorry, that was a joke, but you're getting the drift, right?
Yeah, I'm getting the drift.
Wow, but there's so much sweetness. And that's what I love about Octomore. In fact, the first time that we had Octomore, we expected it to be unidimensional, just all smoke.
Yeah.
But it has layers.
Yeah.
Like even here at 167 ppm, the smoke doesn't hit you. It's the sweetness and the dried fruits that you're getting from the various casks.
I think smoke is definitely fairly prominent.
But
it is like also, I mean, it's been poured for a while and kept, so I think some of the smoke is also dissipated.
But it's not unidimensional. It's not just
it's
smoke
not
that
unidimensional, but I'm saying smoke is
Of course,
definitely
I mean,
there.
That's what makes Octomore what it is.
A lot of dried fruits,
Oh, yeah.
raisins,
Apricots, some berries like cranberries.
yeah.
Oh wow.
There are a little bit of spices also.
Cloves.
Cloves, cinnamon.
So I think this could definitely do with few drops of
It
water.
has to. It's cask strength, so I think the spiciness has really opened up in the whiskey now. Now that the smoke has settled down, I am getting those spicy notes.
But for me, it's the red fruit notes that has become pronounced now. I'm getting like more of those strawberries and cherries.
The sweeter notes are definitely there, like those berries, figs, apricot kind of a note.
Dried apricot.
Yeah. Okay.
Let's have a sip.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Oh.
Okay, it's very bold and very intense on the palate. Of course, because of such high peat levels, smoke is something that clearly just takes over. But as the smoke, I think, settles down, the spicier and the sweeter profiles come in. Like, I'm getting some of those wine cask notes in the whiskey.
But whenever you're having an Octomore, don't be put off by the first sip because the smoke is so intense. Your palate might get, or your senses might take some time to get accustomed to it.
Yeah.
But give it the time, and you will uncover the layers that the whiskey offers. So after the initial smoke, I think there is a bit of saltiness that I'm getting.
Okay.
But then, those dried fruits elements kick in. It has a nice chocolatey note also coming through. Like, it reminds me of that chocolate with a hint of sea salt.
Okay.
Dark chocolate with a hint of sea salt. Lots of dried fruits,
Okay.
especially more on the red fruits. Because probably it also has to do with the fact that it's finished in Austrian sweet wine. Sauternes, we know, is a sweet wine from the Bordeaux region. So those dried fruit notes are very, very pronounced on this one.
I also think the palate is, the texture is waxy and oily.
Yeah.
The spices, again, the cloves and the cinnamon, you start to get.
Bit of pepper as well.
Yeah, I think black pepper.
But this is delicious. Now I've had the third sip of the whiskey. with each sip,
Right.
I feel I'm discovering more layers of the whiskey. Like the first sip was all about the peat. That's where it took me a while to sort of gather my thoughts, and because that much of peat can sort of like,
It's too much to handle.
it will make you unstable or your taste buds go haywire. But now, like, oh, it's beautiful.
Actually, it's a shock to the senses instantly, like when you put it. But I think the second and the third sip, now that the palate is smoked up completely, I think that's when it starts recognizing the other flavors in the.
I mean, just to think of it, peat, which is from earth or earth. So you have earth, you have fire, which signifies your peat, and you have water, because water is a very critical element in making barley.
Right.
So you have three elements, which are very like, which make the universe.
So this is a whiskey from the universe.
And for everyone in the universe. But it's delicious.
I don't think it is for everyone in the universe because it can be off-putting for people who don't like bold and intense whiskies. Because it is not just peat is obviously bold and intense, but I think the other flavors are also very, very intense.
The peppers, the spiciness from pepper, that oak. It also has that pulled oak.
Okay.
Or the honey glazed oak. It has a bit of that. So, but also the best thing, while all the flavors are intense, it's a beautiful harmony. It's and that's what I think Octomore has also been trying to do, is to make sure people don't view it as a whiskey that is all about smoke and peat. There are layers. Yes, initially if you're not used to such high ppms or such heavily peated whiskies, you might get disoriented with so much peat hitting your senses. But if you give it time, I think you will fall in love with this whiskey.
I think people who also like peated whiskies can get disoriented because the amount of peat there is in the whiskey, and also it's a younger whiskey. It's an 8-year-old whiskey, so the peat also is more intense. Had it been like a 15 or a 18-year-old whiskey, I think the peat would have been a little more subdued.
So that's also by design. Octomore keeps its whiskies younger. Because if you remember, one of the best whiskies that we've had was, I think, the 11 series in Singapore, which was just a 3-year-old, 3 and slight couple of months, and ppm, like, not heavy ppm, but like high alcohol. But that's the intent, because the younger whiskies will always have a higher ppm, because with age, peat sort of mellows down. Swati, what about the finish? Probably the longest finish that we've had in a while.
Yeah, it's definitely very long, very smoky for sure.
But don't you get that sweetness?
It is sweet. What I'm also getting interestingly in this whiskey, and I don't get it in a lot of other whiskeys which have longer finishes, is coating on the palate, which is like very waxy, very oily, is kind of lingering for a very long time. I've not come across a lot of whiskeys, even if they've had that texture on the palate, it doesn't stay for a long time. There is a bit of sweet notes, which are like those stewed apricots or figs, the spiciness from the peppers. There's a little bit of saltiness, and yes, there is this dark chocolate note at the back. That also, I think, is there in the finish.
You know what I'm also liking about it is there is a bit of sweetness at the core towards the finish, which is the sweetness that you get from the malted barley, like the malt sweetness, which is there in spite of such heavy influence of cask. So it's beautiful, very well balanced. I think for me, the finish is, of course, long. It's intense. It's very flavorful. And probably that's the reason why they call it a masterclass as well. It's delicious. It's delightful. I think there is no other way for me to describe this whiskey.
What would you rate it?
Oh, 10 on 10. 11 on 10. See, because we've had it before, right? And we've had it at an event as well. It's not just about peat. It's such a good balance between, and you keep mentioning that, marrying peat and sherry is not easy because both are very intense flavors. Here, think of it going through 4 or 5 different wine casks, yet getting that with that intense peatiness, and yet getting that balance of flavors. That over a period of time, it all sort of blends so well together. I think it's one of the best whiskeys that you could have. And no wonder now all the Octomores the moment they are launched,
They're sold out.
Sold out.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I would rate it a 9.5.
Yeah.
Purely because I think peat can be a little overwhelming at times.
Come on, finish it. We
Nah,
have to
I'm
finish it.
not finishing this entirely.
Really? Then it's not 9.5.
Yeah, I mean it's a well, I would say it's a flavorful whiskey. I wouldn't say it's the most well-balanced whiskey in terms of peat and sherry or peat and wine casks coming together in harmony, because peat is definitely and predominantly the most I would say dominant character in the whiskey, which of course is also the approach that the distiller had taken with Octomore series, so which is fine. So, but yeah, I think in the first sip it just is very overwhelmingly peated, and that's why I would just give it a 9.5. And there you have it, a whiskey review of one of the peatiest whiskies on the planet. Let us know in the comments below if you've tried this whiskey and what do you think about it.
And don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. And yes, please do answer the quiz question.